By the dawning of the 26th century, all of the Earth's communications had been taken over by a single evil empire, Microsquash Corporation, doing business as Big Mother. All digitized information was required to pass through Big Mother's InfoGates network, where it was edited, propagandized, and censored. The Earth's libraries had been declared off-limits, and the few remaining librarians had gone underground. The World Wide Web, originally the catalyst for an information revolution in the late 20th century, had become the single source of communications control since Microsquash drove everyone else out of the market in the 21st century. In the year 2525, 3 bold underground knowledge workers risked their lives by embarking on a plan to destroy Big Mother, thereby restoring open communications to the masses. Their plan was to travel back through time to the 20th century to rediscover the origins of the information age and then to bring that knowledge back to the 26th century. Operation Genesis was initiated when they broke into the Gatesonian Institute and hijacked a 23rd century time shuttle.
That was one rough trip. My gosh. Everybody okay?
Yeah.
Doing fine.
I wasn't sure this old time shuttle was going to make it back here so far. Webmaster Michael, all systems seem to be operational?
Sir, we're wired to the max.
Wow, that's fantastic. Pilot Vibeka, are you all right from this trip?
Doing fine so far.
Well, have we reached our pre-coordinated destination?
I believe we are approaching the 20th century, Commander Bob.
Thank you, Pilot. Thank you very much. Well, I think, Webmaster, we need to start our research by finding Dr. Roger Summit, who I understand was the creator of Dialog. Think we could find his webpage?
I think so.
Good.
Energizing now.
Dr. Summit, what was the problem you were trying to solve in the early days of cyberspace, the purpose of your experiments, and who was affected by all of this?
In the early days, when I was first at Lockheed, they said it's easier to redo research than it is to find out if someone's done it. So the problem we were trying to solve was to utilize the power of the computer to couple it with the intellect of a human being in a way that we could identify from masses of document databases those documents which were of interest to the individual. When we first started Dialog, computers were used for computing trajectories and doing accounting. There was very little so-called word processing or text processing that was done in those days, and Dialog was one of the very early applications that dealt with text itself. Now, as the computers evolved, we see that mail and the use of text in communications has become paramount and really one of the most useful applications of the computer. If you can provide a tool that will allow people to access the published literature to find what it is they want or what they need, I think you've provided a tool that is comparable to reading literacy. Because after all, if you can't find what you need when you need it, what good does it do you to be able to read? So I see it as fitting in this whole scheme of developing a printed language, developing publications, developing a literate population, and then providing a tool that really amplifies or magnifies the effectiveness of literacy by providing access to the published literature, which isn't really possible to any large extent without the use of a computer. But we weren't alone in this. We, as a matter of policy, have never developed our own databases. We depended upon the secondary publishers in the early days to provide us databases, as well as the government publishers. In fact, our very first contract was at NASA with the NASA STAR database, Scientific and Technical Reports database. Later on, we had the ERIC database, another government database in education that came to us by way of contract with the U.S. Office of Education. Lee Birchinall was in charge of that at the time. Our customer base started out to be government librarians by virtue of those databases. But as we put up databases such as InSpec and Psych Abstracts and others, we soon branched out into the special librarian field. And special librarians, as well as government librarians, recognized that this was a tool that could allow them to do what they had been trained to do, namely to find reference material in response to questions. Although databases tend to follow discipline lines, real information problems cross those discipline lines. If, for example, you're developing a new product, you need to have access to patent data, you need to test the environmental effects of that new product, you need to do some market research to find out if there's a market for the data, and you really want to do this all at one sitting. You don't want to interrupt and go a lot of different places for it. So I felt all along that we wanted to have Dialog multidisciplinary as broadly as possible so that people could solve an information problem completely at one sitting.
Thank you, Dr. Summit.
Where to now, Commander Bob?
Well,
I'm picking up data from an ancient form of news and information. I believe they used to call it a newspaper. Can you link us, Webmaster?
Why do you think they call me Webmaster?
I don't know.
I think I'm linking to him now.
We can see the
Energizing.
newspaper headlines up here on the monitor.
Energizing now.
Commercial service, 1972. Sounds like an important date. Let's make a note of that one. First Dialog customer meeting. I wonder if they call that update.
Update.
Classroom instruction program, teaching people how to search. There's an important clue. We'll need to bring that one back to us. Well, let's see. I think we need to find someone like Mel Day, the former chief of documentation at NASA. Do you think you can link us to him?
I'm linking to him now, Commander.
Very, very good.
Energizing.
Mr. Day, what were the data and documentation problems you were trying to solve at NASA, and how did you solve them?
One of the problems we had with a batch type system is that it was slow, and it was impossible for the person with the question to interact with the database. He would write his question down, he would send it down to the computer room, they would batch the questions. If he had a halfway decent priority, he might get the answer back in a day or a week or 2 weeks. And then when he got the answer back, he would usually have to modify his question, and this was very, very time consuming. So we decided that in order that we should have an interactive system, and so that the individual with the question could interact with the database, get an answer back essentially immediately, and then move on from there. And we made a study of the field at that particular point in time. This was in 1960. And we decided that the Dialog team at that time, the Roger Summit team at that particular time, was the best qualified to do the job. And we asked them to produce a system which we called NASA Recon. But there was some relation to Dialog. And it was to be used by NASA at its central facility in Washington. And it would provide online interactive service to all of the NASA centers around the country. And that went active in 1965. But it was not a publicly available system then. And it did not really become publicly available until the 1970s. And the fly in the ointment at that time was the communication system. The NASA system brought a whole new dimension to the access to the ability of individuals to access databases. Roger was a very unusual individual, and he had an insight into the potential of the online system that most people didn't have. There were a lot of very capable technical people out there, and they were very good on a technical side, but they didn't have much vision beyond that one application that they were working on. And Roger was able to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Day.
Commander Bob,
Yes.
I'm linking to more news now.
More news. Let's make some notes of this.
Energizing.
Dial order, closing the data loop, actually getting documents. That's an amazing discovery. Dial index, wasn't that the first mega index? I read about that in the history books.
Meta.
Yes, that was a big one. And Data Star going online in Europe. Global. Important point. Well, I think we need to speak to someone now like maybe Dr. Lee Birchinall, the founder of ERIC. Can you link us to his webpage?
Energizing now, Commander.
My involvement with the information industry goes back to 1965, when I became responsible for the establishment of the Educational Resources Information Center, or ERIC as it's known. ERIC was one of the first of the national information systems being established at that time, and this was sort of at the dawn of the information era. We knew we had a very large job in getting that system going, and the only way we could do it was to establish partnerships with commercial and other organizations. And at that time, that naturally led us to Dialog, which was a pioneer in the development of the online information systems. In my opinion, as the official that was involved at the time, I felt Dialog was doing the best job of getting the database known and used among librarians and in the schools, which was our intended audience. I don't think we could ever have gotten the ERIC program started, let alone developed into a full national information system, if we had not used the resources and the expertise of private companies like Dialog. Here was the problem we faced. On the one hand, there was this vast, unorganized outpouring of educational information, reports, descriptions of new practices, evaluations, all kinds of information. On the other hand were these millions of potential users at all levels of education in all kinds of disciplines with all kinds of interests. And here we sat in Washington with a federal budget of a couple $1 million, which isn't a whole lot by Washington standards, and a staff of less than 10 people. Now, there was no way we could link up those users with this vast amount of information without going to the private sector. So we made a very purposeful decision to create what is probably the most publicly supported information system around today, and that was ERIC. And we went to the companies, as I said, and sought their expertise in marketing and in connecting to the users. And Dialog began that in the late 60s and has continued to this day, and I think very effectively. Perhaps the greatest problem or bottleneck early on was simply the limited memory in the computers and the high cost of the memory. I can remember Roger at one point worrying that when they added the full abstracts that he was going to go broke by the cost of the memory that was going to be required. But fortunately, with the advance in technology, costs of memory going down, huge memory becoming available, and that problem disappeared. I think the other, as I think about this, another possible frustration was how to provide the education and the training to people so that they could take advantage of this resource made available through online searching provided by Dialog. And I think Dialog helps solve that problem greatly by offering these very considerable discounts, particularly to library schools, so that virtually every librarian that came out of a library school not only knew Dialog, but knew Eric.
Thank you, Dr. Birchall. That was very helpful information.
I'm locking on to more news, Commander.
Oh, very good. Let's see what we can find out.
1885.
85. Sounds like a good year. Dial mail. That sounds like an electronic mail service.
Email.
Yes, email. Very, very good. We'll have to make a note of that.
87.
1987. CD-ROM product. Wasn't that little platter that they used to use?
For
and they put
music.
music and
Right,
data.
Remember those?
Yes, yes.
Used to
One
have-
search. Multi-file, cross-file searching. Very important. We'll have to bring that back with us. Very, very important information. Knight Ridder. The newspapers are getting into the act now. How do you
Smart
like that? My goodness gracious. All right, well, that's all very helpful information. I think now we should talk to someone who knows things from the customer perspective. Are we anywhere near a fellow by the name of Bob Donati, who was Dialog's former director of U.S. sales?
Here he is, Commander Bob.
Uh-huh. You could link up to his webpage.
Energize.
One of the great virtues or attributes of Roger Summit was that he really had a tremendous vision about what was needed in terms of getting access to information, not on its own right, but because the information was there to solve problems and so forth. And fortunately, a lot of things were going right for us at the time. There were databases becoming available in computer form, certainly some of them in the scientific area. There were large-scale computers, such as the IBM 360 series with extensive storage. There was just the very beginnings of terminal equipment, no PCs. The dial-up communications was in somebody's eye, but was around the corner. And also we needed the software, and that was what Roger saw was useful and what was needed, and he had ideas in terms of how to make retrieving this thing easy and natural. So it was a wonderful time to be in at the beginning and to see 4 or 5 different factors all came together at the same time. In the beginning, since there were very few of us in this activity, every individual had to do a large number of things. We didn't all do everything. For example, I was never involved in formulating the databases and loading them and so forth. But in terms of field work, I regarded myself primarily as a customer person. At the time that we got going, and when there were very few of us, I felt then, as I did all along, that this was the beginning of a very needed service. I mean, for industry, society, what have you, and that we would make a go of it. It was very slow at first, and there were certain challenges, particularly in terms of machinery, equipment, the capability of a computer to provide access all the time or rapidly enough and so forth. But it was a really thrilling and exciting thing to do, and the customers couldn't get enough of it. I mean, what better job could you have but to deal with customers that would take as much as you could offer them as you can. Dialog really has been blessed with great loyalty on the part of its customers. And this was personal loyalty, too, in terms of the users that we had in very large corporations and others. I mean, they're really too numerous to mention, and I'd almost be embarrassed to mention any particular names of people who appreciated not only the quality of the product itself, but also the quality of the human contact that they were getting, and Dialog's philosophy about the importance of this, and it wasn't just a business, but helping people solve the problems.
Thank you, Mr. Donati. That was very, very helpful information. Well, you know, I think next we should probably find someone who is a publisher, because I think I want to get the spin on that to bring that back. So one fellow who comes to mind is Mr. Jeff Pemberton. Now, you might recall that he was the publisher of online and database magazines. So, Webmaster, you think you could find him for us?
Here he is now, sir.
Mr. Pemberton, how did you get the idea to publish magazines about the online industry, and have you kept up on all the developments in that industry?
The idea for Online Magazine came after I made a visit to Alan Meckler, who now runs Meckler Media. At that time, he had a small microform magazine, and Roger had asked me to visit him. And after I was done, I was driving back home and thinking of magazines, and all of a sudden it occurred to me that the online business had no magazine. And I'm a journalist, and so I put two and two together, and by the time I got home, I had the idea for Online Magazine, and I had pretty well figured out the general direction it would take. The idea of having a practical how-to magazine I think came naturally because I was a Wall Street Journal reporter early in my career, and so that was the kind of editorial treatment that I was accustomed to, and I just naturally have a disinclination to write in theory, and it was obvious that what the industry needed was practical information on how to use these tools. Getting the writers at first required some help, and I did get very gracious help from Bob Donati of Dialog, with whom I had worked when I was consulting, and Bob identified some of the key players, and I then would call them up and, if possible, go and visit them in person. And I had put on a sales pitch to convince people that there really was going to be a magazine called Online. And so that's how that worked out. The way we adjust to the needs of the marketplace is fairly simple, because most of the articles are written by working professionals in the field, and top professionals, and by definition these are the people at the leading edge who are up to date on new technologies. So when we talk to them, we find out what they're doing, and all of a sudden there we have a new topic. And we are focusing much more attention on the internet. I think it won't be long before most or all information will be transmitted by the internet. So that will give rise to more end-user searching as prices come down.
Thank you, Mr. Pemberton. Very valuable information for us.
Commander, I see more news items on the screen.
Oh, yes. Well, let's take some notes here. Make sure we get the information. These news items are very, very helpful to us.
History.
History. Right you are. Duplicate detection. Now that saved time and money. Didn't have to do all that searching to find out what's going on. 1994. The end of the century. Dialog era copyright compliance. I know a little something about that. That's a very innovative system. Very, very good. Very important. Very important. Night Reader Information changed its name.
Nice building.
Nice building. Oh, very good. Historically, yes, that's very true. Oh, well. Now, before we head home, I think we should visit with one maybe super searcher.
That's a good idea.
Now, who should we visit with? I know. Can you link us to Reva Bash? She was known as an industry super searcher and futurist. Can you think you can do that for us?
Absolutely. I can't wait to meet Reva.
Oh, boy. All right.
Energizing.
When I started searching at information on demand in the early 80s, we used TI Silent 700 terminals and acoustic couplers, those Mickey Mouse ears that you plugged into the telephone. 300 baud seemed really fast, and when 1200 baud came in, it was almost impossible. When I found myself capable of reading scrolling text at 2400 baud, I knew that somehow I'd internalized this online thing. My first experience with actual interactive searching would have been the mid to late 70s at an engineering firm. I was used to looking things up in nuclear science abstracts, government reports, announcements, and abstracts, and eventually got Dialog training and realized I didn't have to do that anymore. It was miraculous, the ability to add concepts together rather than browse through an index looking for the one relevant reference to pop out was just astounding. I was hooked instantly. I had no idea when I got involved with searching what it would grow to be today. I think there was a great pride among those of us who mastered online searching in what we were capable of doing. Of course, we now find ourselves part of something much bigger than we are ourselves, and that would have been completely incomprehensible and unforeseeable when I first got into it. I feel very lucky that that I somehow hooked into something that's become as just phenomenal and world-changing as online today has become. For me personally, I would say that the overwhelmingly revolutionary and enhancement was the addition of a huge assortment of full-text databases. I think full-text searching really transformed the industry. It was no longer a two-stage process of finding the citation, then looking it up and going all over. You had the information. You had instant gratification right there. I do think that the web is an imperative. The web, or whatever comes after it, is simply non-negotiable. That is the new information environment, and it is an open environment. What it holds, and what I'm seeing happen now, is the ability to link in documentation and context-sensitive help in a much more graceful way than was ever possible before for those users who might not be as adept at it. I think that the main transition in our profession has already taken place. Those of us who are doing more than keeping narrowly focused on our own technical specialties and denying the changes that are going on. Anyone who's paying attention to what's going on in the information environment, I think, has already begun to realize that there's tremendous opportunity for information professionals. As webmasters, as designers of the next generations of search engines, which heaven knows need help being designed, as signposts and guideposts to where the quality information is in this huge expanded environment. There's still a tremendous role for us as information professionals, and an awful lot of us are already out there doing it.
Thank you, Ms. Bash. Boy, this has been one successful trip, I must say that. Indeed.
Fascinating.
Well, you know, I think we've learned enough now about the origins of cyberspace, the so-called information superhighway, to bring back to us to our own time. And with this knowledge, the information underground can break Big Mother's lock on information and quench the people's thirst for knowledge. So thank you for participating in this journey. And Pilot Vibeka, would you take us home, please? Back to the future.
We are on our way, Commander.